All right, so how did you manage on that mini challenge? Well, if you haven't given it a go, then this is a good time to pause the video and just give it a try before I go through the solution with you. It's really, really important that you try and do this yourself because I can't be here with you every single time you try to make a website. So it's really, really important that you pick up on these skills by yourself. And remember, I'm watching you, but not in a creepy way. Just like, I haven't hacked your webcam or anything. I'm just, saying like metaphorically. Anyways, moving on. So, I presume that you've already given it a go and you've struggled and maybe you failed, maybe you succeeded. So we're going to run through the solution now. So essentially what we're trying to achieve is this outcome. We've got 3 features which each have a Font Awesome icon above them and they are responsive. So when we're in the iPad and the iPhone sizes, there's only 1 feature per row and they take up 100% of the width. Plus there's also the fonts and the colors, and also when you roll over these icons, they change a color. So we've learned how to do all of this before, and it's a matter of remembering it, giving it a go, and searching Google if we get stuck. So let's get started. So I'm going to keep the final piece over here just to compare, but the site as we have it up to now looks much less interesting and a bit more like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to give each of these features their own div. Because as you can see at the moment, if we scroll down to the right section, I've got these 3 sets of features and they each have an H3 title and a paragraph just explaining the feature. And in order to get the responsiveness and to style each feature individually, I'm going to need to give them some form of identification. And that in HTML CSS is going to end up being a div. So I'm going to create 3 new divs and I'm going to give each div a custom class name. So I'm going to call them feature box, which seems to make sense to me. Doesn't really matter what you call them as long as they are the same, because we're going to apply the same style to each feature box. So let's create another div, feature box, and I'm just going to copy this and paste it, and we can now transplant these lines over to here. All right, great. So now we have our feature boxes and each set of features belongs in its own div, which we can style separately or apply the same style to each 3. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make each div take up 1/3 of the width of the screen on a large desktop or a laptop size screen. But when it's on an iPad or when it's on an iPhone, I want it to take up 100% of the width. So I can do that by applying some Bootstrap classes. So we remember that we have to use the column class and then we specify the size that we want it to be responsive to. So we're going to say column large, so that means laptop size and above is going to take up 1/3 of the row. And remember, each row is split up into 12 units, so 1/3 of 12 is 4 units. So column large 4, and let's just go ahead and paste this in the other 3 places. And if you load up your website right now, you'll see that nothing has changed. And that is because the Bootstrap grid requires that you nest it inside a class that has the name row. So we can specify which ones should go into the same row, essentially, so that your responsiveness can happen across different rows, for example. So something like column large 4 in 3 separate rows will be very different from all of them in the same row. So let's hit save and let's check it out and see if it worked. Okay, cool. So they are now laid across the same row and they're taking up 1/3 of the screen each. And if I go into iPad size, you can see they're now taking up 100% of the width, as does anything smaller than that, so mobile size, still taking up 100% of the width. So we have succeeded. Ka-ching! I was planning on getting our sound designer to create these nice UI sounds for the video, but he is sick, so you will just have to live with my terrible sound effects. So it's like Angela SFX from now on. I've recently been trying to challenge my friends on what is the most realistic lightsaber activation sound you can produce without any instruments other than yourself, your own body. I have found that many people are very bad at sound effects, myself probably included. Anyways, let's move on. I think I've had too much coffee today. I really apologize. All right, let's get back to work. The next thing I need to do is that you can see that at the moment our features are right up to the edge of both edges and they're taking up a bit too much space. In order to get it looking a bit more like this, we need to add some padding. So the first bit of padding I'm going to add is to this feature section. So that's this big box here, and you can see the 3 parts highlighted. So we can go into our CSS and we can select the features section. So we are now down to title, image, and let's add features section. And let's just comment that out. So we can now target our features. And remember, it's an ID, so we have to use the hashtag or the pound sign. And I'm going to add a padding around all 4 sides, and it's going to be 7% top and bottom and 15% left and right. So basically almost double the amount of space on the left and right as there is on the top and bottom. So now let's hit refresh, and you can see this is looking pretty nice, right? So each of our feature boxes are now centered in the middle of our feature div. And you can see that with that little bit more white space, it's much easier to read, a lot more organized, and it's getting close to what we want as our final outcome. So the amount of padding that you might have added might differ from mine, but as long as you've got a similar end outcome, then that's absolutely fine. There's many, many ways of skinning a cat. Probably not very vegan friendly. There's many ways to peel a carrot, maybe. Let me think on that. Oh boy, this video is going to need a lot of editing out. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is you can see that over here, our text is nicely centered inside each feature box, making them feel quite together. But here they look a bit weird, especially when you're using icons like this. You tend to want to have your text centered around the middle of the icon. Otherwise, if it's all left aligned, it looks a little bit strange. So let's go ahead and do that. So remember that previously we added this feature box class, which goes around each and every feature. So now we can target that feature box class, and we can say something like, all the text inside each feature box should be aligned to the center. So let's check it out. Yep, looking pretty good. Now, each line is still a little bit too long, so we can add a bit of padding inside each feature box so that we push it closer together so that the width goes down a little bit and we push all the text onto 2 lines, but it's very easy to glance and read rather than having these long lines. So I'm going to go ahead and add maybe around 5% of padding. And now our text is looking a lot shorter and a lot easier to read. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the fonts of these H3s that we've got over here. So you can see that each of the titles for the features are these H3s, which we can target quite easily up here. So we can say, let's change the font family to, I think we can change it to Montserrat Bold. And this is to establish the visual hierarchy so that when a user looks at this website, the first thing that their eye is drawn to is usually the blackest, the boldest, the biggest thing. And we want that to be the title first and then the subheading. As a web designer, very often it's kind of like you're a visual tour guide and you're guiding people through your website. So you want them to read, for example, a big title first, then maybe your brand, then maybe what all these buttons are about. And you can do that quite easily using the font weights and also the font size. So this is something that you can be aware of the next time you come across a well-designed website. See how they're establishing visual hierarchy and guiding you through the website. So I've already made the title very attractive to the eye. I'm going to tone down the subtitle, the feature text, by changing its color to a gray color so that we make it even lower on the visual hierarchy scale. So the feature text is contained inside some paragraph elements. So I'm going to go ahead and select the paragraph elements, and I'm going to change the color to this grayish color, which is 8F, 8F, 8F. Let's hit save and refresh, and you can see now that visual hierarchy is now unmistakable. There is no way that somebody's eye is going to be drawn to this line before it is drawn to this one. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now, the next thing is we need to add some icons, right? And as I told you, we're going to get that from Font Awesome. So let's head over and let's search for those images. So I've got the heart one and the target and also the check mark, which is in a circle. So we've got these three icons and we're just going to copy them in there. So it was check, target, heart. So let's just rearrange this a little bit. So the first one is the check circle. So I'm going to copy that and place it inside our HTML, inside our feature box div, so that everything inside each feature is all grouped together. So that one was circle, the next one was bullseye, so that's going to go here, and the last one was the heart, which is going to go here. All right, so now you'll see that we have our tiny icons here, but that's a little bit too small to see, and we need to make it a little bit larger. So rather helpfully, the Font Awesome icons all come in different sizes. And in order to get a different size, for example, the 3x size, all you have to do is just add the class 3x or 5x or 7x into your Font Awesome icon. So in our case, I'm going to go for maybe the 4x. So we can go ahead and add, so this is Font Awesome symbol, Font Awesome check circle, and Font Awesome 4x. Now, if you refresh, you can see that is now a much larger size, and it's a lot easier to see and actually looks like a feature icon rather than just something very small. So let's go ahead and add that to all three other classes. Hit save, and now we have our icons sized and looking pretty good. All right, so now we need to style these icons. We need to give them a color. So in order to style the icons separately from the title and the feature text, then of course we need to give it a custom class. Now, of course, you can use any of the classes that has already been applied to it. But for example, if you pick this class, FA check circle, then you'll have to add more styles to these other two. Now, if you pick something that's common between all three, say FAS, that means if you use any Font Awesome symbol, then you're going to be applying the same style to that future icon as well. So it's always a good idea to apply custom classes when you're trying to style it inside the CSS, unless you're just trying to customize some feature of Font Awesome or of Bootstrap. So in this case, I'm just going to give it a class of icon, and I'm going to paste it in all three places, and that allows us to now go into our CSS and style our icon. So our icon is going to be colored in this orangey color, and when we hover over it, it's going to be the same color as this background. So I've already provided those hex values to you. So the normal color is going to be EF8172. Let's hit save and check it out. Looking nice, right? So it'd be nice if there was a little bit of space between this icon and this title, because at the moment they're a bit too squished together. It's kind of sitting right on top of that feature and it doesn't look very good. A bit too mushed together. So let's add a margin bottom to the icon of maybe say just 1 rem. And you can see with just that little bit of space, it looks a lot nicer. Very often small touches can produce really dramatic effects. So the final thing that we want to do for our challenge is make it change color when we hover over the icons. And the color is going to be this same red color in our color palette. So do you remember how to change hover states? Well, we have to use a pseudo class called hover. So we select the icon, we use a colon, and we select one of these pseudo states. And the one that we want is called, I'm never going to get to it. All right, I'm just going to type it in. It's called hover. And we've seen this previously when we looked at classes and pseudo classes and selectors in CSS, but we're going to put it into action in this case. And when our icon is inside the hover state, I'm going to change the color to FF4C68, which is that pinkish color that we've got at the top. So now, dun dun dun, it's changing color every time we hover over it. And that wasn't even very hard, was it? All right, looking nice. So how did you get on with this challenge? If there was something that you couldn't implement or something you just found out about, then don't worry, go back, change your CSS code, change your HTML code in order to make it work. If you got it all right and it's all looking pretty good, other than maybe you got slightly different values for the margin or the padding, that doesn't matter. You're guessing by eye, right? So that's not a big deal. But it's all about knowing how to use those Bootstrap classes in order to make our features responsive, and also things like, the hover states that we learned before, and knowing how to change the font weight, what to select to change the font color, etc., and all of that good stuff. All right, so in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at another Bootstrap component, which is the carousel. And this is like a slideshow that we're going to implement so that we end up with a really cool testimonial section, which allows us to go between all of the different testimonials. So you have all of that to look forward to and more. So I will see you on the next lesson.